Welcome back. As stated at the beginning of this morning's show, by this time, the country must be well aware of the unfortunate circumstances surrounding the residential fire which took place last week at Ruknri Nook in Maraval. More than revealing the situation, we at AM Prime strive to seek solutions. In this regard, this morning's show is targeted at focusing on fire prevention in the home. Our desire is that citizens heed the warnings and employ proper fire safety tips prescribed by the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service. Helping us with this goal this morning is a myriad of representatives from the Fire Prevention Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service. Gracing us with his presence this morning is Acting Fire Sub-Officer Jude Rogers. Officer Rogers of the Central Communications Unit of the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service takes a keen interest in fire prevention, having a great desire to encourage members of the public to plan for their safety and that of their loved ones before and not after a fire occurs. Welcome to our show, Officer Rogers.
Good morning. Good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, Nikoli, and to be here to share valuable information with your viewers.
Excellent. And well, of course, we, as I stated, that's our purpose, really, to provide the kind of information that the public needs to adopt new strategies, approaches to various things. And we're really hoping that coming out of this unfortunate experience that took place recently, people really take on board the information, the directions, the guidelines, the regulations, all of these things that are meant to help them. And so I'm really grateful that you're here to help us understand what some of those things are and the practicality of implementing those things in many cases. So to just start things off, I understand that we have some statistics as it relates to some persons who have lost their lives, unfortunately, as a result of residential fires. And I understand that over the period 2016 to 2019, a total of 68 persons lost their lives, and an average of 705 residents have their fires per year have affected families throughout the length and breadth of Trinidad and Tobago. How are these things happening? What do we see as being some of the main issues that lead to these kinds of fires and, of course, the loss of life?
Right. To speak directly to the main causes of these fires, we have to look at the anatomy of the fire and really speak to the electrical, the type of building materials that we're using. We speak about unattended people who are making mistakes, so to speak, or leaving their whole household unattended in certain instances. We have arson in some of the cases, but the main cause seems to be pointing us to human error. And once we identify that human error and accidental causes are some of the main contributors, then we need now to work on the human element to bring persons to a level of awareness that they will understand that they themselves can be the main person assisting with their own safety.
And I know that we saw a video recently circulating on social media giving tips in terms of what you can do, what you should do in terms of fire prevention. Do you see that the population as a whole is properly aware of some of the things that they should be doing, or is it a case where many times you find persons simply don't pay attention to the warning signs or are just blindsided for one reason or another when it comes to knowing exactly what they should and should not be doing to prevent a fire?
Right. So my experience over my 18 years in the fire service has sort of pointed me to the fact that persons are more focused on, at this point in time, on crime. And with crime being the main topic on everybody's agenda, we are focused on keeping the bandits out and protecting our homes in terms of burglary and all of those factors. But we're not so much concerned about the fact that fire can take everything away from you in one incident. So what the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service and the Chief Fire Officer is attempting to do is to raise the level of awareness to the point where fire now proverbially becomes on the front burner in terms of how we treat with protection of our homes.
Yes. And well, if you can walk me through the steps. Let's say an individual is at home. They pick up the phone and they call 990. Correct?
Yes.
Someone answers on the other end and they are reporting that a fire has broken out at their home. Walk us through the point or the steps that are taken from that point of the phone call to the fire officers arriving on the scene. What happens so that we'll have an understanding?
Right, so first and foremost, I would like members of the public to know that when you dial that number 990, there are persons on the other end of that line that are waiting and are eagerly ready to take your information to dispatch the nearest appliance, what we call a fire appliance, which is what you would call a truck, fire truck, to your call at the earliest possible time. What they're really looking for is a person who somehow has the ability to remain calm under that pressure, because you may be actually involved in the incident, but a lot of bystanders are the ones who make the call first, because when you're involved in a fire, people tend to panic a little bit. But we want you to stay calm. Provide for us your name, your location, the type of incident that is occurring, whether it's a fire incident, a gas release, whether somebody may have fallen and become injured and is incapacitated, because we deal with those type of calls as well. And we also need some sort of landmark to get to you, or some sort of proper location and a contact number, which the operator can stay on the line with you or call you back. And if the incident is continuing, they can walk you through some of the measures that you would take. Now, to answer the other part of your question, Nikoli, when that call comes into fire control, and that's located centrally in the Shipowner's area, they then dispatch within a few seconds of the call the nearest division of the fire service. And we have 4 divisions in the fire service: Central Division, Northern Division, Tobago Division, and also we have the Southern Division. So those are the 4 divisions that we have. And those appliances in those divisions, they would then dispatch their appliance within 30 seconds of receiving that call. And everyone in that station who is attached to those vehicles are ready to and are waiting those types of emergencies, and they respond within 30 seconds during the day, and we have 60 seconds to be out of the station during the night.
Wow. That sounds like one of my mornings when you wake up late and you have to be out. But what I wanted to find out as well, it might sound like an out of the way question, but when I am giving you my landmark, as you say, so I'm giving you my address and so forth, is it that you all largely depend on the fire officer's knowledge of the area, or do you put it into Google Maps and you're literally following Google Maps going down the road? How? Because it's very important to be able to pinpoint exactly where this fire is occurring. So what goes on there?
All right. So what we do, when people think that the fire service is sort of like when we don't have a call, we don't have anything to do. But what we do a lot of familiarization tours when we're on what you would call downtime. When we're not on an active call, we are doing familiarization tours. We are setting up zones that we go into, and we're looking at high hazard industries. We're looking at specific zones. So the station compound is what we call it, the entire area that we're responsible for. We have to familiarize ourselves with it. Google can only take you so far, Nikoli. Understanding of your situational ground and the topography of the ground, and whether you can actually fit into some of the streets with the appliances is something that you can only know by actually being there and going directly into the risk. And that's what we do. We focus on familiarizing ourselves with the areas because we've broken down every compartment of Trinidad, or every area in the Trinidad, into a particular zone. Yeah. All right. So yes, we'll use the Google Maps, but we depend heavily on the knowledge and know-how of the fire officers. Some little shortcuts that get us there a little faster sometimes, Nikoli.
Nice. Now, of course, without a doubt, the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service is so very important to our way of life here in Trinidad and Tobago, because we see many times where the fire service would have come to the rescue, saved lives and infrastructure from what could have been a much more disastrous catastrophe. So to se. But like most public entities, there are shortfalls, unfortunately. There are gaps, there is problems when it comes to resources and so forth. What are some of the challenges that the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service faces that you think especially would be important for the population to understand? Because I would imagine the population has great demands on the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service, and rightfully so, because if this is the arm of the state's apparatus to protect against fires and prevent and so forth, what are some of the shortcomings that we should be cognizant of as persons lobby on the ground for better conditions for individuals and so forth?
All right. So, Nikoli, that's a very good question. And in every state agency, you're not always going to have every single resource that you may want. Mm-hmm. But what is needed, the basics that are needed within the fire service, obviously, would be our appliances, which we use, and the equipment that we use in the appliance, which has to be renewed over a period of time. Now, in the fire service, this doesn't happen by chance. We must prepare, and we must also plan, just as you do, for disasters and for the types of disasters that we respond to. So one of the key things that I'm going to introduce is understanding the statistics of what is actually the type of fires that are coming into the fire service and how we respond to them. That determines the type of equipment that we purchase, and that is done long in advance. So to get a fire truck here, you're literally going to have to put that on order at least 2 to 3 years, and it is something that is specific and that is built out for our region. Yes. We have the challenge of the topography of Trinidad and Tobago, some hilly areas. We have areas where you have to, sometimes even you may have to conduct a rescue, let's say off one of the precipice going to Maracas. Mm-hmm. And so we have specialized equipment. And so to answer your question, what we really need is those equipments to be renewed over a specific period of time. There is a turnaround for each truck. There is a turnaround time for each piece of equipment, and it's useful life. Yeah. And so once those are replaced on time, the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service will be equipped to do the job that they're required to do for our nation.
Of course, we do hope that those things are provided, because it's not to say that you are an organization that, people don't think about or what have you. You're the first port of call when it comes to an emergency, a first responder. So it's very important that you all get those items. We do have a video that we're going to start showing in the Watch This. But before we go over to that, I understand that we have some fire safety measures that we should be cognizant of when it comes to the home. What are some of those things that individuals must be cognizant of as it relates to fire safety measures at home?
Right. So let me introduce immediately the fact that in your home, prior to a fire, you need to do some things. And what I say, or what we say in the fire service, is to plan, to prepare, and then to bring that now into action. All right? So to do that, you're going to have to identify the hazards within your home. And if we look at the home, we have hazards in relation to the kitchen, we have hazards in relation to electricity and the use of electronic equipment. So that now tells me that I need to have an early warning device to detect, because I cannot depend on myself when I'm at rest or asleep being able to detect a fire in the dead of night. So you need your smoke detectors, you need your heat detectors in the kitchen, smoke detectors in the bedroom. Mm-hmm. And Trinidad and Tobago, I want you to know that these devices are available at your safety stores throughout the country. All right, so this is not something that is far-fetched or even an exorbitant price is attached to them. Yes. In addition to that, when you detect a fire early, you need to have a working and a serviceable fire extinguisher readily available to you. But you also need to know how to use that fire extinguisher. Mm-hmm. So I'm going to just give the basic acronym for how do you use a fire extinguisher right at this point. And it's PASS. P-A-S-S. P, pull the pin. Mm-hmm. There's a safety pin on the fire extinguisher. A, aim the nozzle at the fire extinguisher at the base of whatever is burning. S, squeeze the discharge lever so that the medium can be expelled onto the burning object, and sweep that nozzle from side to side to evenly disperse the extinguishing medium onto the fire, and that fire will be eradicated once it's in the incipient or the early stages. Yes. And last but not least, prepare an evacuation plan for your family. Always have 2 ways in and out of your building. And the rest of it will be dealt with my fellow colleagues who will come up afterwards.
Excellent. Now, before I run from this part of the interview into the video and your other colleagues, the pandemic has had a tremendous impact on every single citizen across Trinidad and Tobago. Has the fire service noted anything of particular interest to the population when it comes to how the pandemic has impacted on whether the work of the fire service or fires breaking out at homes? Has there been an increase, a reduction? Are people more cognizant of their homes? What have you all learned during this period?
Well, that's an excellent question, Nikoli, because what we've noticed within a year and a half into the pandemic is that because so many persons are at home, virtual learning is taking place at home, persons are now working from home, our interaction with electricity has increased and electronic equipment in the home. That in itself poses a greater hazard towards fire safety in the homes. And so therefore, we've been noticing an uptick in these types of fires. Not all of them turn into catastrophic fires, but yet still, how do you use your laptops, how you use your cell phones, whether you multi-tap on extension cords, all of these things have a factor. The use of air conditioning in your home, it has increased exponentially as technology increased. So too does the potential for fire in the home. And this is what the Chief Fire Officer is homing in on. So the video that we're showing is part of a developmental program. It's part of an awareness program that will raise that particular awareness of how you interact with electricity in the home and then what you need to do to really correct that. So I'm really excited to launch this video series here on WESN, and I want to say that you all are very blessed to be first to premiere this video to the nation and to the region.
Well, without further ado, let's jump over to the Watch This segment where we begin showing that video, premiering that video that we've been talking about thus far. Let's head over.
Yes, be careful.
Honey, I feel I'm going to start to cook, yes, because these children must be hungry now, right? Okay.
Shucks. Oh. These plugs, oh my gosh.
Hey, Richard, hey, come from there. Come from there.
What's going on in here?
Oh God, what would you do if this happened to you? Dial 990 in case of fire emergencies and always have a serviceable fire extinguisher ready and available at all times.
So we see one of those situations there where members are at home, they are putting a strain on their electrical supply through that surge protector there, but it has erupted into a spark and a fire is ensuing. Is this a common feature of how, in some cases, fires start? That overloading?
Definitely, Nikoli. Definitely, Nikoli. You see, an electrical circuit with its breaker is designed to take a certain amount of load on that particular circuit. And when we keep adding more and more appliances onto that, we are actually overloading that particular circuit, causing the possibility of a greater resistance on that line, the development of heat, the possible outcome of a spark. And all it takes is a spark, an ignition source, so that a fire can begin. Yeah. These are some of the major things that we need to look out for.
But then, so the issue, and it raises for me the issue of proper planning in the design and construction of homes. Because if you properly plan, I would imagine that these would be the right amount of outlets I will need in this room, separated or spaced out in this way. Then it may reduce the overloading on one particular outlet with an extension or a surge protector. Do we see many persons interacting with the Trinidad and Tobago Fire Service as they ought to, based on our laws and our regulations, when constructing homes?
And there is an element of consultation. There is an element of regulation which governs that. So we have Part 5 of the OSH Act, which deals with the certification of businesses, industrial premises, but also residential sort of has a little bit of leeway in that they don't always come directly under our purview. And it's more of a voluntary approach where a resident is concerned in getting the necessary certification from the fire service. Yeah. So therefore, one of the questions that is being asked is, should we look at the legislation or the regulations under, let's say, the Town and Country and Planning Division, and whether or not residential property should come under the purview of the small buildings code, and thus bring things like burglar proofing and fire escapes into play and so forth. So these are some of the administrative measures that is not, how to put it, an active or reactive measure, but it's a proactive measure to change the way that we certify buildings and bring all residential under the gambit or the ambit of the small buildings code.
Now, speaking of codes, it is my understanding, and you could correct me if I'm wrong, that Trinidad and Tobago does not have its own indigenous set of building codes. Rather, we pull from an internationally recognized code the things that are applicable to our circumstance, and we just use that. Is that in fact the case? And is there, if so, is there, let's say, some danger or shortfall in that approach rather than developing our own local building codes?
Well, that in itself is not accurate. The Trinidad and Tobago does have their own building code. As to whether or not we would borrow, lend, or get from international codes, the fact of the matter is we belong to other bodies that govern these things as well. So we also need to adhere to international standards.
Sure.
So our codes would mirror the international standards. But to say that we don't have a code or a building code, that is not the case. A number of levels of approvals must be sought from different agencies, Town and Country and Planning, Ministry of Health. The fire service is also part of that. So plans for major buildings, the cinemas, the schools, townhouses, high-rise buildings, all of those come into the Trinidad Fire Service, and we put our stamp of or requirements on that and do inspections during the building phase and during the completion phase before those buildings are occupied. And this is why when you go to the theater, the movies, or even Napa, or any of those buildings, those major buildings where a lot of people are assembled, you see exit signs, you see emergency lights, you see corridors that are well lit, doors that have signage that says exit here.
Yes.
Fire alarm systems. All those things are proactive measures that the fire service has to be involved years in advance before you can actually have the outcome of a building.
And you know, a lot of these things, people, they don't even think about it because they go into these spaces, and whether it's a cinema, they go there simply to take in their movie, they go to a lot of these recreational sites and so forth, but fire, how approval was done, these things are not necessarily at the top of mind for any citizen, I would imagine, unless you have a fire service background or something in safety. But over the years, because we have seen the introduction of the OSHA Act over the years, and a number of other pieces of legislation or amendments, I would imagine, going into that. Are we more aware now, today in 2021, about fire prevention and the need for safety at an occupational level, at a residential level, than we were, let's say, 10, 15, 20 years ago? Is there that general awareness among the population now, or concern?
That's a very interesting question, Nikolai. You have me thinking about this because as a little boy growing up, I remember looking at television, TTT at the time, and observing some videos that were done by the fire service. And that helped to shape my whole thought pattern as a young person growing up primary school. And I want to believe that that legacy has continued with the fire service, where we work along with the preschools, the primary schools, the secondary schools, because we recognize that you have to change and have a culture shift of safety by approaching the children first and foremost. And as they grow into adults, they grow with that safety culture within their mindset and becomes now part of our nation's DNA. And that is what we're attempting to do here. We're going to be focusing our efforts, our outreach programs on the schools, on the children, and hoping that they would bring the parents along with them.
I really wish you the best of luck, because this is exactly what is necessary, and it will help save all of us in Trinidad and Tobago as we go about our daily lives and so forth, knowing that people are well aware of the things that you need to put in place to protect life and property. Officer Rogers, let me thank you so much for coming and teeing up things for us this morning. We're going to take a break, and when we come back, we're going to have your colleagues join in the discussion. But thank you so much for allowing this to happen, and I know that you worked very hard to make sure that all things were put in place for this show, where we put this strong focus on fire safety and prevention. So thank you so much.
Thank you.
All right, guys, so we're going to take a break, and when we come back, we have more for you here on AM Prime. Stay with us.